realizing the fact that we needed substantially more police officers, gave them the authority to recruit 50,000 police officers every year for 4 years. Now, that sounded like a good idea at the time, but the challenge became the funding for it. So the budgeted, what they call the envelope funding was started by Okonjo-Iweala, then as a finance minister. And what that simply means is maybe the police come and say, we need 100 billion to run this year. And after all the back and forth, maybe 20 billion was kind of approved for them to, for the year. And now the government will now say, even that 20 billion, we don't have it. So here is 5 billion, just continue running things for now. We'll get back to you later. And then that's how, that's how the envelope system started. And then what happens is you now realize that by the end of that financial year, out of the 20 that was approved, you'll be lucky if 10 in total have been deployed. So the envelope funding system doesn't allow, and by the way, this is not just the police, this happens to some other agencies as well. It doesn't allow you to access all the approved amount. I mean, for example, last year, you saw, for example, that the capital release for federal government institutions did not commence till about September, October last year. And when that commenced, some agencies and MDAs got only 5 or 10% of their capital budget released because the government said there was no money. So that's why, for example, concerning 2024, the Senate had to give a fiat for the 2024 budget to continue operation till June this year, because a lot of the capital expenditure have not been performed in any way. So we've been blighted as a nation with this envelope funding system since those Obasanjo years.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. The point that the Inspector General of Police was making in a significant way was that things have changed from 10, maybe even 5 years ago in the security sector, and everything costs money now, and it's not getting any cheaper. And so I think he was making the point that for the responsibility given to the police, if it has to be carried out properly, then the truth of the matter is that the budget simply doesn't match up with, one, what they are able to do, and two, what is expected of the police. That point was made that it's a very serious matter. But with this penchant that we have there's no money, there's no money. I'm not saying that's what we say to everything, but if the police is to play its role, do you really see any leeway here for the police if the government doesn't, for whatever reason, pay the utmost attention to Mr. Gbetokun's plea, if you want?
Well, traditionally, I mean, the funding that has always been allocated to police does not allow for proactive policing in Nigeria. It only gives reactive policing possibilities. I mean, the budgets are so poor. I mean, I remember during the Buhari regime, I was a member of the Presidential Working Group on Police Reform, or Implementation of Police Reform, as it was called at that time. And one of the things we discovered was the fact that some of the DPOs, as at that time, their allocation was about 5,000 naira a month to run their station. I mean, that's how poor it was at that time. And I think maybe the challenge this current IG has, I'm using the word challenge in inverted comma, is that I think he's keen to move the police away from reactive policing to proactive policing. And if you want to move policing to proactive policing, which is what we need in the country, a lot more investment is needed upfront, because that means you need intelligence gathering capabilities, you need early warning system capabilities, you need, rapid intervention team, across the country. All these things cost money. And the challenge the police have right now is the fact that, you know, they paid their bill to the president, but several other, you know, institutions also want money from the same pot. But I think what the government might need to do here is to, for once, give police the priority it deserves. Because what's happening right now is that over the last decade, the military spending has been ramped up significantly. But if you look at those spending, you find a lot of those spending were what I call policing duties of the military. That's why we have military now on the streets across over 34 states in Nigeria. Those really are policing duties. And the military themselves will admit that these are policing functions. You know, so some money needs to be repurposed from what is being given to the military and to the police. And traditionally also, you have a situation where the military have always had it easy, collecting money from the government than the police did. You know, so that is a fundamental problem. So for this current policing plan by the current leadership of the police to actually bed down and, you know, be impactful, significant amount of budget need to be made available, even if it's only in the interim for, say, 2-3 years, to ramp up those capabilities. Let me give you a very good example.
Sure.
The IG last year, I think, set up what they call the Special Intervention Squad, which is an attempt to move policing from reactive to proactive. But the challenge is that Special Intervention Squad, for example, cannot be armed with the regular AK-47 that the police carry. New, more sophisticated equipment will need to be procured. Those teams will need to be trained in those new equipment, as it were, for them to be able to be effective. There are things around mobility. If you are called rapid deployment team, then you need to be able to get to site or location very fast. We're talking of, you know, not just vehicles, we're talking about helicopters that needs to be provided for the police so that they can respond more quickly to things. So all these are cost. So the plan is there, but I think the funding is needed. The government needs to task itself and provide additional funding for the police to be able to achieve the objective and, you know, help to bed down the peace that, you know, we hope for in the country.
Indeed. And I suppose also intelligence that we often immediately think about when you're looking at effective police work, that also will cost a pretty penny. And here we are talking about a paucity of funds. And the very, very latest in gadgetries, the computer systems, in IT, all of those kind of things. None of this, especially the cutting edge aspect of the whole scenario, none of that is going to be cheap. And if we don't have that, then we are not really, you know, we're not at par. When I say we, I'm thinking of the police now, might be thinking that way, that look, we know what is available, we know what can be done, but that's in an area where perhaps, you know, the wherewithal is indeed within reach. We don't have that here. Do you think this paucity of funds, such as the police was complaining about in a different kind of a way, do you think it's going to affect our intelligence gathering? Because the military have their own intelligence. I imagine police also has its own intelligence.
Well, I mean, not that will it affect, it is already affecting, you know, the capability of the police. Like you rightly said, intelligence gathering, either in terms of electronic intelligence or human intelligence, is not cheap. You know, and a lot of money. I remember, was about, you know, to show you how long this problem has been, about 8 years ago, I was training some senior police officers, and one of them gave an example that they were, what's it called, they were, you know, following, you know, gathering intelligence on a particular suspect, and the suspect ended up lodging in one of the big hotels in Abuja. I'm not mentioning names. And so the police, so you said, okay, they decided that the best thing is to get a room next to the room of the suspect and then use their, you know, electronic intelligence to eavesdrop on the conversation taking place there. And then he went through, you know, put in the approval request. His bosses said there's no money to pay for the hotel room. you know, for him to be. So he said that was the end of the program. So they had to limit themselves to public areas of the hotel, like the lobby and all that, you know, but they couldn't gather the proper intelligence they could have gathered if funding was not an issue. But that was a long time ago. But that gives you an idea of the fact that intelligence gathering costs a lot of money. And I think the government, like I said, needs to repurpose some funding to the police to encourage the current leadership of the police who wants to move the police to more proactive policing. Because we need to stop something in this country where we have a situation where, I don't know if anybody reads the newspaper report of many of the instances that's happened in terms of, you know, Boko Haram and all these, you know, terrorists. One thing is always in all the media report, police always show up after they've gone. So, which means these guys will be in a village for 3 hours, do all their nonsense, and then leave, and it's only after they leave that police show up. That is what I call reactive policing. What should happen really is, it seems even the terrorists, you know, seem to be doing better than the Nigerian government in some of these areas. When the former leader of Boko Haram was killed just a few years ago, you know, by one of his bodyguards, we know intelligence now told us that the bodyguard that killed him was actually a member of ISWAP, which is Islamic State for West Africa, that was embedded into Boko Haram 6 years earlier. So Islamic State for West Africa could embed their agent into Boko Haram and activate him when they needed it to act. And you're telling me a whole country like Nigeria could not have our own agents embedded into those organizations and take them out? No, I mean, so these things are doable. It's just that we need the resources to do it. I mean, it's a real mess. I mean, I remember saying many years ago that what we have in Nigeria is like what I call policing by donation. That's what we have. Because if police was to survive purely on its appropriation by the National Assembly, I think our policing will collapse in this country within 3-4 months. Because the money is just not there. Take the issue of diesel and petrol for police vehicles. The budget allocated to them cannot buy, for a whole year, cannot buy diesel for 3 months. So that's why many people who interact with police in their localities every day notice that police will be begging for diesel for their car, you know, generator for their office, you know, petrol for their days, you know, and then state governments also will step in, you know, private foundation will step in. So I'm saying policing by donation. All those additional funding sources has helped the police to keep their head above the water. But the issue really here is that is not a replacement for proper funding of the police.
Indeed.
And I think the government, and I think the challenge, looking at this from the government perspective though, the challenge the government might have created for itself is that if you go back to, say, 1975, and you're talking about funding of the police, you're talking of funding just one institution. Today, the duties performed at that one Nigerian police in 1975 is now performed by about 9 different agencies today. So which means, as government is funding the police, government will have to fund the 8 other policing-related agencies as well. So I remember I made a recommendation a few years ago that if the government was just to collapse many of these agencies back into the police, the budget of police will quadruple overnight.
Indeed,
instantly,
I get you.
Without government spending any penny extra.
You know, indeed. Well, thank you very much for that enlightenment. The other thing that the Inspector General was particular about was the non-early release of even the appropriation that it does have. And he was hoping that things would get better. It's one thing for an appropriation to exist. It's another thing for it to actually be disbursed. So that is further complicating the operations of the police, I imagine. But before you even go, before you even comment on that, I was going to say that all of this that you've been speaking about is, while the police strength, man, woman strength, is where it is, we've always been hearing that they're nowhere near adequate for our needs. So no doubt the Inspector General of Police and his team, they must be thinking of enhancing the numbers of the police. How doable are these kind of laudable objectives in the situation that we find ourselves in. We need more policemen. I don't know if we're going to get them in the short to medium term.
Well, I mean, training police officers take a while. And clearly, yes, we do. You know, I'm a little bit sort of on the fence on this. Yes, we need more police officers. But more importantly, the way policing is done also needs to be changed. You know, I mean, in the Presidential Working Group on Police Reform, there was a report that I wrote then under the Buhari regime on what I call the civilianization of security in Nigeria.
Okay.
And in that report, I remember I gave example of going visiting AIGs, DIGs who are friends of mine, and they said, oh, you know, I gave a particular instance, and I said, well, what do I want to eat? I said, pounded yam. He said, and the next thing is called Sergeant Solomon. He said, yes. I said, you need to go and make pounded yam for doctor. So it became clear to me that all their domestic staff are uniformed police officers. So in my head, I said, hold on a second, this doesn't make sense. So if we don't have enough police officers, we have many of them tied with VIPs, but that's legitimate. But then civilians all over the world, what tends to happen is all those domestic staff are not uniformed officers. They are vetted civilians who do all this work. But in Nigeria, their shoes is shined by police officers. You know, everything's police officers. So in terms of numbers, the number of police officers actually available for frontline policing are drastically little. And that's the problem we have. So what I'm saying is, if we ramp up their numbers, but we don't change the way they work, you find that a lot of the ramped up numbers will end up doing all these other domestic chores. So there needs to be a change of perspective in policing. To say, I mean, for example, if you go to New Scotland Yard in England, you know, you find out that for their back office function, 60% are civilians. They're not police officers.
Okay.
You know, so we need to get things done. Intelligence analysts, all these people, they don't need to be trained police officers. You know, so we need to rejig the way the police is composed so that we can release more of them for frontline policing duties, which we don't have at the moment. So we need more numbers. Yes, I agree with that. But also, we need to change the way the police operate to make sure more police officers are made available for frontline policing duties.
One would have thought that the police reforms that we've been hearing of for quite a while now, Nigerians have been hearing from experts on the need for police reforms. In fact, something about it's actually a work in progress as we speak now. It is ongoing. Well, I don't know. You'll probably be able to advise us on that, because all of these things that what you've just spoken about now will probably go under police reforms, that we just need to reform the way we do things. Is that a work in progress? On the one hand, you said that, well, you're a bit on the fence as to the numerical strength of the police, given what how we've distributed them once they are taken on. But I don't know what you think about that. The reforms, are they ongoing?
Okay. Under the Buhari regime, like I told you, there was a presidential working group which was, put together by the, was an initiative led by the chief of staff to the president at that time. So we were, we had a presidential working group on police reform, of which I was a member. It was a subset of that working group, of which also I was a member, that actually dealt with issues around police salaries and wages, which led to some increase at that time. Now, the issue really about police reform is, I think in Nigeria, I've come to conclude that what we need is not police reform. Okay. What we need is internal security reform, of which police is part. Because think about it. If we do police reform and we have a reformed police, are we going to have an unreformed civil defense? Are we going to have an unreformed Federal Road Safety Corps? Are we going to have an unreformed NDLEA? Are we going to have an unreformed EFCC? Are we going to have an unreformed, what's it called, Code of Conduct Bureau? And all look, I can list all of them. The issue here is policing has been sort of disaggregated in Nigeria too much. We now have several agencies performing policing duties. So if we are therefore looking at policing reform, we can't focus just on the Nigerian police. We have to look at it as internal security reform, which now include, which police is at the head of it. And part of that reform, like I said, has to include the fate of those other agencies, whether they need to remain separate. If they are to remain separate, then the police need to have a greater umbrella, over all of them for the purpose of intelligence gathering. For example, all the private security companies, firms in Nigeria, who, by the way, employ more people than, police and all these other organizations put together, they are being licensed and managed by the civil defense by law. So police do not even have direct access to the data of this organization. They have to go through civil defense. So the issue of our internal security needs to be brought together in form of internal security reform, of which the police will be chief. But I think focusing purely on police reform without reforming those other institutions, is an issue. This leads to this issue of state police as well. People talking about, are we going to have state, civil defense corps? Are we going to have, state EFCC? Are we going to have state NDLEA? So the whole mess that has been created by politicians over the decades is such that our security has been so siloed into different fragments, many with overlapping mandates, to the point where a few years back, the civil defense in Kogi State, the civil defense took the police to court, saying that the police was encroaching on his duties. And I remember that case when they went to Court of Appeal. Court of Appeal said, no, the police can pretty much do anything they like because they are the primary civil defense organization in Nigeria. And they are the one mentioned in the Constitution. All of you are creation of the National Assembly. So the police has the preeminence. So this is a challenge we have. We created NDLEA, but the power of police to investigate drugs has not been removed. We created EFCC, police cannot equally, investigate financial crimes. We created road safety, police can also investigate and deal with, road, safety and traffic issues. So all these things are duplication of efforts. So if we are talking of reforming the internal security climate in Nigeria, then we need to look at it holistically and not just focus on the police and leave the others unreformed.
How about the matter of appropriation, as I mentioned, this matter about late release of what has been appropriated that the IGP complained about? This no doubt must be hampering the efficiency of their processes. It
is. Particularly because if you are looking at procurement of security equipment and kits, many of these things you need to buy, pay, and the manufacturer and delivery timeline can be months. So really, police can order something in January, it might be up to September, October, November before actually it's delivered. So if you are using envelope funding where even the fund is not released till September, there's a problem with that instantly. So yes, the issue of the, the no-release of funding has been an historical one. I remember, I think about 16 years ago, I conducted a research at that time where I wrote to the Senate Committee on Police, House Committee on Police, Police Service Commission, the police itself, and then Ministry of Police Affairs, those 5 organizations. And I asked for the numbers for police budget across a 3-year window. You'll be shocked that when they all responded, they all sent me different numbers. 5 different numbers were sent. That shows you the mess in police funding way back then. Because some will send what the police requested, some will send what was approved from what was requested, some will send what was released from what was approved. So the whole thing is a mess. And I think the president needs to bring police and all things security completely out of envelope funding. If their funding is 1,000 naira a year, make that 1,000 naira available. Because like I said, I mean, look at military funding, for example. When the military under Buhari ordered these helicopters from the US, the delivery time was 3 to 5 years before the helicopters will be released, will be manufactured and delivered. So security products are not things you can always buy off the shelf. So that's why all their funding needs to be made available upfront for them to plan properly and then order those things and then they're delivered throughout the year. So I do agree with the IGP in the sense that, yes, police and anything security should be removed from envelope funding. Because you have to realize that that funding is actually a reduced version of what they asked for. If somebody is asking for 100 million and you are giving him 20 million, and even that 20 million that cannot do the work is now not released on time,
yeah,
it beggars the question as to, what are we doing as a nation? So there is a priority. And by the way, this is not a new concept. For example, all procurement of above a particular number, I think maybe 500 million or a billion or whatever, goes to FEC, Federal Executive Council, on a weekly basis. But, 3 presidents back, they realized that, hold on a second, security matters cannot be discussed in open FEC. So what did they do? They removed all security procurement out of FEC so that any security procurement from the agency will go straight to the president for his assessment and signature. So giving security a special dispensation is not new, is what I'm saying. Already, in terms of Federal Executive Council, security procurement do not go there because of the nature of security. In the same way, the government can simply say, because of its nature, security, we are removing you from envelope funding. And that also can be done by presidential fiat.
Indeed. Okay, at this stage, thank you very much, Dr. Charles Omole, DG, Institute for Police and Security Policy Research. We'll take a quick break now, but please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back and we'll include your calls after this. Okay, welcome back. Our guest is still Dr. Charles Omole. He's the DG of the Institute for Police and Security Policy Research. So thank you for staying with us, Dr. Omole. Now, just before we go on to another subject, I wanted to ask your thoughts on the numerical strength of the police. We've heard that we need more. You've also given your reservations in that regard. But I was going to ask you, where does the number stand now, and where is it being advocated that it moves to? Where are we now in terms of all these UN kind of indices about so many policemen to so many 100,000 people? What are the figures for Nigeria?
Thank you very much. In terms of numbers, the police officers, I think when we, under Buhari regime, when we were doing the report on the wages of officers, I think the number then was just under 320,000. It would have probably gone up now to say 350, or give or take. But we've had close to 400 at a particular point in the past.
In the past?
The thing really is, yes, but the thing really is we don't need. Part of the problem with numbers of the police at the moment was the debacle of the fight between the Police Service Commission and the police in time past as to who should actually be doing the recruitment of the police.
Yes.
And then, if you remember, went all the way to the Supreme Court, and all through those years, they were not recruiting. So really, that's come to create a problem in the police now, where even within the rank and file, you can see the effect of it, where, the rank that has the largest number in the police at the moment are inspectors. Because you go to places, inspectors are doing work that sergeants and the corporals should be doing. But when the people below are being promoted up and they become inspectors, the new people are not being recruited below them, then you have a top-heavy police organization, which is what we have at the moment. So they need to ramp up recruitment massively. Now, the issue of numbers is, for me, I know that, you know, that the UN ratios, but for me, I don't really think that really is our problem. I think the key issue in terms of our numbers is the fact that, you know, given the technology that's now available, we cannot rely simply on boots on the ground to police ourselves. You know, there are lots of things that, I mean, we are moving in that with AI and digital technology. We are moving to a point where one police officer can do the work of 10 if the tools are there. So it's not so much of let's just recruit 1 million police officers and then do what with it. So the issue is we need more numbers, and I think they are recruiting now, which is good.
Okay.
But I also think we also need to improve the quality of those that we recruit. And that, I think, is one of the credits you have to give this current IG, and its focus on attitudinal change of the police. Because a lot of training that have been given to recruits of the police have been largely based on their physicality, not on what's up here in the past. So he's now focusing more on ethics, you know, procedural ethics, you know, and increasing the quality of training they get right from the beginning. You know, because the truth is, in 5 years' time, in 5 years' time, 90% of police officers today who are the rank of CSP and above, 90% of them will have retired from the police. So really, those that are graduating today are the officers of 5 years' time. Yeah. So if we catch them young, so to speak, and infuse them with the right ethics at this stage, in a few years' time, we'll begin to see the benefit of it. So kudos to the IG for focusing on attitude, yes.
Okay, I think we have a caller. Good morning, Mr. George.
Good morning, Yuri. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you for holding on all that while.
Nice to have you back. You look very fresh and new.
Thank you.
And you are back to your brand new state-of-the-art edifice. We congratulate you on your station and wish you well in your new endeavors.
Thank you very much, Mr. George. Thank you so very much.
Okay, Yuri, I am a bit surprised why the president's reform policies have not affected the police. Because police needs reform more than any other organization. If you go to developed countries, for example, England, and you see a policeman on duty, the kind of gadgets they wear will intimidate any criminal that you will not even think of committing any crime, knowing that they have what it takes to track you down and incapacitate you. Some of them do not even hold the guns, but the gadgets around their bodies will show you that, look, this man is capable of disarming you whenever you want to commit a crime. If you look at the army, the military, the duties of the police, they have virtually taken over what the police are supposed to be doing. The police is in charge of internal security. The military is for external aggressions against the country. But what we see now is that 8% of what the military is doing also is internal security controls, which the police should have been doing. I am of the view that the president should look into the budget of the police. How do you allocate 6 trillion to the military and you are taking how many billions, a few billions to the police? You get to the police station, they don't have paper. They have to ask the complainant to go and buy paper to write the complaint and biro. For how long is that going to be? And during Buhari's regime, he instituted recruitment of 10,000 policemen every year. Are they actually doing that? And if they are doing that, where are the policemen? Which money are they using to equip them if they are actually recruiting them? We want the police to be resuscitated back to their traditional duties. All these Boko Haram criminal bandits and all the rest, they are work of the police, not the army.
All right,
so
then.
The president should think about that on how to reform.
All right, then. Thank you very much, Mr. George. Well, you heard it there, Dr. Molly. Some of those things you have also said yourself, you know, but you heard that Did you want to add to that caller? His observations.
Well, I mean, I think the caller is definitely spot on in terms of the fact that we need, you know, to recruit more. I've told you part of the problem in the past is the fight between the Police Service Commission and the police, but that has been resolved now. You know, so clearly recruitment should be ramped up. The proper training should be given to them. You know, but I think from what the caller said, I agree. The government should just tell itself, okay, over the next 3 years, we are going to pump more money into the police like never before. And they will see the difference. They should just try it and see. You know, they will see the difference because our police can do a lot more than they are doing at the moment if more resources is made available to them.
Oh. Okay, Mr. Paul has called in. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Mr. Yuri. How are you?
Thank you very much for calling in. I'm fine, thank you.
Yes, so good morning, Dr. Charles Omole. I heard you also.
Okay, he heard you.
I want to say something about police.
Sure, go on.
Although I was a former police football player, the way we run our things here is not good. It's not the matter of recruiting, you know, more police members. Have they been paid well? Because they cannot be paid well, and
Oh, okay. That line, thank you for calling in, Paul, but that line was a bit problematic. Paul, who said actually he played for the police football team, he couldn't really get his point across. But Dr. Mole, the other thing I wanted to, when I knew that we were going to be speaking with you, this whole matter about when it comes to treating people right, you know, I'm talking about Amnesty International laying a complaint, and we went about their complaint, and the complaint that they made had to be responded to, and there was a wide disparity between Amnesty's, you know, position, and I think when the police PPRO, you know, responded to that matter. What did you think of that? Because we're talking about investigations here. They were talking about what was it now? In fact, they called it Bloody August, and Nigeria government's violent crackdown following the End Bad Governance protest. Your thoughts on Amnesty's position?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I actually have read the Amnesty report, and to be quite frank with you, I am shocked at the claims they make in that report, because as a researcher, I don't see a basis for the conclusions they have come to. Let me explain. For example, a major problem I have with their report is the methodology. You know, Amnesty did not actually send their staff across the country to witness anything during the protests. So what they did was, after the protest has ended, they did what they call desk research, which means they said they were looking at videos, audios. They said they even went as far as looking at death certificate, you know, and they interviewed only 41 people across the country, and they only did interviews in Kano, Katsina, Jigawa, Niger, and Borno states. And from that, they came, you know, with a global picture of what happened. Now, I have a major problem with that. Number one, the sample size is too small to make such alarming claims. And number two, a major element of such report, which is lacking, is what I call the counter narrative, which is when you say police did X, Y, Z, and the police gives you their evidence that it didn't happen, you are obligated to mention it in your report and then give your findings. Let me give you a couple of examples. For example, in Kaduna State, they claimed, somebody was shot by the police. But the police in their investigation said, there was a army unit on patrol. They saw some looters looting and wanted to fire warning shots, and somebody was accidentally killed. The army owned up to it. The officer who fired the shot was detained by the army. Mm-hmm. Yet, Amnesty claimed police shot that person. So, these are things that are verifiable. So once police said this is what happened, the Amnesty should have gone to the army and asked, did it happen? If the answer is yes, then you remove that side of your report. So there's no counter-narrative that explains the position of the police in any way, which for me it just speaks of confirmation bias. Another example is in Borno State. They claim in Amnesty report that I think 4 guys were killed by, this is according to the report, by a police unit driving by and throwing hand grenade at those people. And police have come, and as a researcher, I've researched police for decades. One thing Nigerian police do not have is grenades. It's not part of their kit.
Okay.
Grenades are not for civil policing. So the Amnesty claim police did that. And police came and said, we don't use grenades. It's not, and did I explain? And during that period, there were lots of improvised explosive devices neutralized by the police across the country, and that improvised explosive devices were planted in those places. Those were the devices that exploded, that killed people, not police throwing hand grenade. Yet Amnesty did not reflect this in their report. So what I'm saying is that the whole Amnesty report for me just shows of the classic what's it called, the colonial mentality, and it's a way of, I think, just playing to the gallery. The fact that Nigerians working for Amnesty wrote this report doesn't make any difference, because we know who paid the piper dictates the tune. So there are cogent factual inaccuracies in the Amnesty report which should have been reflected on by Amnesty through a counter-narrative to say, okay, we interviewed people, they said this number of people died. We spoke to the police, this is what the police said. We now did our research across both, this is our final finding. That is how a balanced report is done. But what Amnesty simply did was, a complete anti-police, anti-Nigeria report. And is akin to the same thing they do even with the military in Nigeria. So I think we should not allow ourselves to be hoodwinked by these things. Personally, I feel the day Amnesty writes a report that everything is fine in Nigeria, their funding will go down. So there has to always be a problem in Nigeria for their funding to continue. That for me is my problem. With not just Amnesty, with many of these NGOs and CSOs, that 99.9% of them are funded by foreign powers in Nigeria.
Well, so much so that ACP Olumuyiwa Adejobi, the first PRO, has said that the police will be writing to Amnesty to remove the report, withdraw the report from the public space, because, as you are just saying, I
agree with him.
That seemed to be the way it was going. Mr. Joseph in Ajah, good morning to you, sir, and thank you very much for holding on. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. Thank you very much. My take on this issue is that not just funding for the police, but
hello.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you very much.
Please continue.
Yeah, and my take on this is not just funding for the police. Funding
I'm so sorry about this. That line that you are speaking on, it also appears to, have its challenges, to put it discreetly. Joseph, thank you very much for calling in, but we weren't able to hear from you as much as we would have loved to. So again, well, we've almost run out of time, but so let me quickly go back to Dr. Charles Omole for this. Because we started off looking at the case of the Inspector General of Police going to the National Assembly and defending the budget, the police budget, you know, and I think here we are, we've got a lot of explanation from our guests this morning as to the nature of it, of the police. But I'm just a bit concerned personally with the number. You said about 320, or you know, somewhere maybe we have about 400 now, maybe. I'm just concerned when you look at the teeming millions in this country. And that the police are saddled with the responsibility of internal security. I don't know if even a figure like 400, we're not there yet, we're not at 400, even if a figure like 400 would be adequate. Wouldn't the police still be managing, doing their best, even at 400 as a closer?
Well, I mean, I think focusing too much on numbers might not really be helpful.
Okay.
Is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Because clearly we have police, we have civil defense, we have DSS. You know, so it's not just one internal security agency that we have in Nigeria. I think it's more of the efficiency of the police that is the key issue here. Do they need more numbers? Yes, they do need more numbers. Because clearly, like I just told you, in 5 years' time, you know, anybody with CSP right now, in 5 years' time, there's a 95% chance they'll be retired from the police. So clearly, those need to be backfilled. So there's a lot of, they need to ramp up recruitment. And like I said, the police, this is probably about to begin the golden era of policing in Nigeria with the focus of the current IGP. I feel, you know, it's quite cerebral, and he knows what needs to be done. You know, the few times I speak with him, I just feel the fact that, I think it's running at 1,000 miles per hour, but the funding behind him is running at 10 miles per hour. So that is the challenge, I think, that he has at the moment. So more funding needs to be provided to the police, yes.
Quite a graphic image you displayed there, Dr. Charles Omole. Thank you very much for coming on our program this morning, and hope we get to speak with you again, because it seems like there's still a lot more on the positive side that we can talk about. Thank you once again for coming on the program. So that's our program. That's the program today. Then do please join us tomorrow for a fresh edition. I am Iyori Folarin. Bye-bye for now.
Is a paid